When Jerusalem stirs, when the stones cry out, when the priesthood awakens, the final sequence begins. That moment is here. Not tomorrow, not next year. Now, right now, in a city smaller than most capitals, but heavier than empires, something ancient is being restored. The vessels are complete, the priests are trained, the sacrifice is ready. For 2,000 years this was impossible. The temple destroyed, the lineage scattered, the system broken. But prophecy doesn't negotiate with history. It waits for the appointed time, and the appointed time has arrived. Daniel saw 70 weeks decreed for Israel. 69 have passed, 1 remains. 7 years that will close the age of man and open the age of the king. Jerusalem isn't preparing for tradition, it's preparing for fulfillment. The question isn't if anymore, it's when. And what just happened moved the answer from years to months. Here's what you need to know before it's too late. Every empire that touched Jerusalem fell. Babylon, Persia, Greece, Rome, the Ottomans, the British. They came with armies, they left in ruins, because this city doesn't belong to military power. It belongs to prophetic purpose, and that purpose is waking up.
Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more awe-inspiring stories of faith, survival, and miracles.
Walk the streets of the old city right now, and you'll see something most tourists miss. Small workshops tucked behind ancient stone walls, men working with gold and silver, not for jewelry, for instruments, sacred instruments described in books written 3,000 years ago. The menorah, 7 branches of pure gold, the exact weight, the exact measurements, ready. The altar of incense, rebuilt. The table of showbread, constructed. The priestly garments, woven from the specific threads Moses commanded. Blue, purple, scarlet, fine linen. Not costumes, uniforms for men preparing to serve. But here's what changed everything. For 19 centuries, one obstacle stood in the way, one requirement no human effort could manufacture: the ashes of a red heifer. Without those ashes, no priest could be purified. Without purification, no service could begin. Without service, no sacrifice could be offered. And without sacrifice, the prophecy couldn't move forward. Numbers chapter 19 laid out the rules. A young cow, entirely red, not a single hair of another color, never worked, never yoked, never used for labor. It had to be perfect, flawless, rare beyond measure. Jewish tradition records only 9 red heifers from the time of Moses to the destruction of the Second Temple. 9 in 1,500 years. The ancient rabbis said the 10th would appear in the days of Messiah. Think about that. For 2,000 years, that requirement stood like a locked door. Behind it, the entire prophetic sequence waited. Daniel's final week, the covenant with many, the abomination in the holy place, the return of the king. All of it dependent on a door that wouldn't open. Then, in 2022, something happened in Texas. A ranch bred 5 red heifers, perfect specimens. When word reached Israel, officials traveled to inspect them. Every hair examined, every detail verified. All 5 qualified. They were transported to Israel, placed under constant supervision, protected, observed, waiting for the right age, the right moment. That moment arrived.
Within the last year, these heifers reached the age required for sacrifice. They maintained their qualification. No blemishes appeared, no disqualifying marks. The door that's been locked for 2 millennia can now be opened. But there's more. The priests who will perform the ceremony have been identified. Descendants of Aaron, verified through genealogical records and genetic testing. They've been training for years, learning rituals not practiced since Rome burned the temple. They know the procedures, they know the prayers, they're ready. The location has been prepared, not on the Temple Mount itself, That would trigger an international crisis. But the law allows for the ceremony to take place within sight of where the temple stood. And that location is ready, secured, waiting. Everything required to restart the ancient system now exists. The vessels, the priests, the purification method, the trained personnel, the sacred garments, even the instruments of worship, harps, lyres, trumpets, all reconstructed according to the original specifications. This isn't preparation for a museum exhibit. This is preparation for activation. And when that system activates, when the first sacrifice is offered on a restored altar, Daniel's final week can begin. Not because humans decided it, because prophecy demands it. The sacrifice must be happening before it can be stopped, and it must be stopped in the middle of the 7 years for the abomination to occur. You see the pieces now. Everything written, everything foretold, everything sealed in Scripture until the time of the end is aligning in one city, the city where Abraham offered Isaac, where David established his throne, where Solomon built the first temple, where Jesus was crucified, where the disciples saw him ascend, where he promised to return. Jerusalem, the same city the prophets said would become a burdensome stone for all nations, the same city Zechariah saw surrounded by armies, the same city Ezekiel described as the target of a northern coalition, the same city Jesus wept over because it didn't recognize the day of its visitation. That city is preparing again, not for war, not for politics, for prophecy. The world watches Jerusalem for conflict, but conflict is just the surface. Underneath, something far older and far more significant is stirring. A plan set in motion before the foundations of the world. A plan that every prophet pointed toward. A plan that paused in 70 AD when Rome destroyed the temple and scattered the people. That pause is ending. The people returned in 1948. The city returned in 1967. Now the system is returning. And when it does, the countdown Daniel saw will resume. 7 years, 3.5 of false peace, 3.5 of unparalleled trouble. And at the end, the king returns. Not as a suffering servant, as a conquering king. But before we get to the return, you need to understand what was written. Because what the prophets saw wasn't vague, it was specific, detailed, precise. They named the nations, they described the sequence, they gave the timeline. And that timeline starts with one man, one prophet, one vision that has shaped the last 26 centuries of human history. His name was Zechariah, and what he saw changed everything. Zechariah stood in ruins. The year was approximately 520 BC. The Babylonian exile had ended. The Jewish people had returned to a land that no longer felt like home. Jerusalem was broken, walls crumbled, the temple site sat empty. A generation had been born in captivity. They spoke with foreign accents, they carried foreign memories, and now they were supposed to rebuild what their grandparents had lost. The task seemed impossible, but God raised up prophets, men who could see beyond the rubble, men who could speak past the present moment into a future that seemed unimaginable. Zechariah was one of them, and the vision he received would echo through 26 centuries. He didn't just see the rebuilding of the temple, he saw beyond it, far beyond it, to a day when God himself would step into the story in a way that would shatter every expectation. Listen to what he wrote, chapter 12, verse 10. I will pour out on the house of David and the inhabitants of Jerusalem a spirit of grace and supplication. They will look on me, the one they have pierced, and they will mourn for him as one mourns for an only child, and grieve bitterly for him as one grieves for a firstborn son. Read that again slowly. God is speaking, and he says, they will look on me, the one they have pierced. God, pierced. How can the eternal Creator be pierced? How can the one who formed the universe with a word be wounded? How can Israel look upon God and mourn? This wasn't poetry,
It was prophecy, and it was impossible to fully understand until centuries later when a Roman soldier drove a spear into the side of a Jewish man hanging on a cross outside Jerusalem. But here's what makes this prophecy extraordinary. Zechariah spoke these words 600 years before crucifixion was invented, 600 years before Rome existed as an empire, 600 years before anyone had conceived of execution by piercing hands and feet and hanging a body on wooden beams. He described a death method that didn't exist yet. Think about the precision of that. He could have said struck down. He could have said killed. He could have used generic language about death or suffering, but he used one specific word, pierced, a word that would make no sense until a specific moment in history when a specific person died in a specific way. And he said Israel would look upon this pierced one and mourn. Not just sadness, not casual regret, the kind of mourning reserved for an only son, for a firstborn child, the deepest grief a human heart can experience. That's recognition. That's the moment when you realize you rejected the one you should have received, when you see clearly what you refused to see before, when the veil lifts and truth becomes undeniable. But here's the critical detail most people miss. This prophecy has two fulfillments, two moments separated by time. The first happened at the cross. Jesus was pierced. Some mourned. Mary, John, the women who followed him, a handful of disciples who finally understood too late who he really was. Individual mourning, personal grief, but not national recognition. Most of Israel didn't mourn. Most didn't recognize him. Most turned away or watched in confusion or celebrated what they thought was the end of a troublemaker. So the prophecy was partially fulfilled. The piercing happened. Some mourned, but not the
nation, not the whole house of David, not Jerusalem as a collective people. That part is still coming. Zechariah saw a future moment when the entire nation would look upon the pierced one and mourn together, when recognition would sweep across Israel like a wave, when the grief would be national, collective, undeniable. That hasn't happened yet, but it's connected to everything else Zechariah saw, because he didn't just give one prophecy about the end times, he gave a series of them, and they all revolve around Jerusalem. Chapter 12 continues, verse 2. I am going to make Jerusalem a cup that sends all the surrounding peoples reeling. Judah will be besieged as well as Jerusalem. Verse 3. On that day, when all the nations of the earth are gathered against her, I will make Jerusalem an immovable rock for all the nations. All who try to move it will injure themselves. Do you see the pattern? Jerusalem becomes the focal point. Nations gather against it. They try to control it. They try to move it. They try to claim it. And they hurt themselves in the process. Sound familiar? Every empire that touched Jerusalem fell. Every nation that tried to erase it failed. Every plan to divide it collapsed. The city stands. Empires don't. Zechariah saw that. He saw Jerusalem surrounded. He saw nations converging. He saw conflict. He saw siege. And in the middle of all that chaos, he saw a moment of recognition. A moment when Israel would finally see the one they pierced and understand. But there's more context we need. Chapter 14, verse 4. On that day his feet will stand on the Mount of Olives east of Jerusalem, and the Mount of Olives will be split in two from east to west, forming a great valley. The pierced one returns, not as a victim, as a victor. He returns to the exact location where he ascended, the Mount of Olives. The mountain splits under the weight of his presence. The earth itself bears witness. And verse 9 says this, The Lord will be king over the whole earth. On that day there will be one Lord, and his name the only name. This is the complete picture. The pierced Messiah recognized, the returning king establishing his reign, Jerusalem as the center of global transformation, nations gathered, mourning,
recognition, return, kingdom. All of it starts with the moment Israel sees him. Now, here's why this matters right now. For that moment to happen, certain conditions must be in place. Israel must exist as a nation. They must control Jerusalem. They must be in a position to collectively recognize someone. And the global stage must be set for nations to gather against them. For 1900 years, none of that was possible. Israel was scattered. Jerusalem was occupied. The nation didn't exist. The prophecy sat dormant like a seed in frozen ground. Then, 1948 happened. The nation returned. Then, 1967 happened. Jerusalem returned. Suddenly, the prophecy could resume. The conditions existed again. But there's one more piece of Zechariah's vision that connects directly to what's happening now. Chapter 3, verses 8 and 9. Zechariah is shown a vision of Joshua the high priest, and God says this, "I am going to bring my servant, the branch. See the stone I have set in front of Joshua? There are 7 eyes on that one stone, and I will engrave an inscription on it, and I will remove the sin of this land in a single day." A single day, sin removed, atonement completed. That's the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur, the holiest day in the Jewish calendar, the day the high priest entered the Holy of Holies, the day sacrifice was offered for the entire nation. But without a temple, without a priesthood, without the system in place, that day became a memorial, a remembrance of what once was, not a functioning reality. Zechariah saw it functioning again. He saw the priesthood restored. He saw the service resumed. He saw atonement made. And for that to happen, everything we talked about in the opening must be ready. The vessels, the priests, the purification method, the red heifer. All of it connects. Zechariah's vision of national mourning, his vision of Jerusalem surrounded, his vision of the king returning, his vision of atonement restored. They're not separate prophecies, they're pieces of one sequence. A sequence that requires the temple system to be operational, because the mourning happens when Israel recognizes the one they pierced. But before that recognition, the system must be in place for the prophecy to unfold as written.
Daniel saw the same sequence. He called it the 70 weeks. 69 passed, 1 remains. And in the middle of that final week, something happens in the temple. Something that can only happen if the temple service is functioning. We'll get to Daniel in detail shortly, but first, you need to understand how Zechariah's words connected to the New Testament. Because the apostles saw something in his prophecy that changed how they understood everything that happened. John stood at the cross. He watched Jesus die. And when he wrote his gospel decades later, he made a point to quote Zechariah directly. John chapter 19, verse 37. "These things happened so that the scripture would be fulfilled. They will look on the one they have pierced." John connected the crucifixion to Zechariah's prophecy. He saw the piercing as literal fulfillment, but he also knew something else. He knew the full prophecy hadn't been fulfilled yet, because Israel as a nation hadn't mourned. Jerusalem as a people hadn't recognized Jesus. So John wrote another book, the book of Revelation. And in the very first chapter, he repeated Zechariah's words with an addition. Revelation chapter 1, verse 7. "Look, he is coming with the clouds, and every eye will see him, even those who pierced him, and all peoples on earth will mourn because of him." Every eye, every people, not just Israel, the whole world. The prophecy expanded from national to global. When Israel mourns and recognizes the pierced Messiah, the whole earth will witness it. No one will miss it. No one will be able to ignore it. That's the day Zechariah saw. That's the moment the apostles anticipated. That's the event the prophetic timeline points toward. And every preparation happening in Jerusalem right now moves that moment closer. Because the recognition doesn't happen in a vacuum. It happens in context, in the middle of conflict, in the middle of siege, in the middle of the exact scenario Zechariah described when nations gather against Jerusalem. We're watching those nations align right now. We're watching the alliances form. We're watching the tensions rise. We're watching Jerusalem become the burdensome stone Zechariah predicted. But before we look at the nations and the alliances and the modern fulfillment, we need to understand what happened in history that paused everything. We need to go back to 70 AD, to the moment when Rome destroyed the temple and the prophetic clock seemed to stop. The year 70 AD changed everything. Roman legions surrounded Jerusalem. For months, the siege tightened, food ran out, disease spread, desperation turned to horror. And when the final assault came, it was absolute. The temple burned, stones were torn apart, gold melted between the cracks, and soldiers pried every stone loose to retrieve it. The prophecy Jesus gave 40 years earlier came true with terrible precision. Not one stone will be left on another. The sacrificial system ended that day. No more offerings, no more priests serving in the holy place, no more Day of Atonement rituals, no more Passover lambs slaughtered in the temple courts. The entire structure that had defined Jewish worship for 1,000 years disappeared in fire and blood. And with it, the prophetic timeline paused. Because every prophecy about the end times assumed a functioning temple. Daniel saw sacrifices stopped in the middle of the final 7 years. Jesus warned about the abomination standing in the holy place. Paul wrote about a man of lawlessness sitting in God's temple, claiming to be God. All of that required a temple, a priesthood, a system, and after 70 AD, none of it existed. The Jewish people were scattered again, driven from the land, forbidden to enter Jerusalem except one day a year to mourn at the ruins. The Romans renamed the province Palestine. They tried to erase even the memory of Israel. For 18 centuries, it worked. Israel ceased to exist as a nation. The people survived in diaspora, scattered across every continent, speaking dozens of languages, living under foreign rule. They maintained their identity through faith and tradition, but they had no land, no government, no sovereignty. Every generation prayed the same prayers, next year in Jerusalem, next year in the land. Prayers spoken in Russia and Poland and Morocco and Yemen. Prayers that seemed like wishful thinking, because how could a nation destroyed for nearly 2,000 years ever return? History said it was impossible. No nation had ever been scattered so completely and survived. Egypt didn't return. Babylon didn't return. Assyria didn't return. When empires fell and peoples scattered, they disappeared into other cultures and never re-emerged. But the prophets said something different. Isaiah chapter 11, verse 12.
He will raise a banner for the nations and gather the exiles of Israel. He will assemble the scattered people of Judah from the 4 quarters of the earth. Ezekiel chapter 36, verse 24. I will take you out of the nations. I will gather you from all the countries and bring you back into your own land. Jeremiah chapter 31, verse 10. He who scattered Israel will gather them and will watch over his flock like a shepherd. The prophets didn't speak of Israel's end. They spoke of Israel's return, and they tied that return to the final sequence of events before the Messiah's kingdom. For centuries, skeptics pointed to these verses as proof the Bible couldn't be trusted. Israel was gone. The land was occupied by others. The people were scattered beyond recovery. The prophecies failed. Then, the 20th century happened. In 1917, the British took control of Palestine from the Ottoman Empire. The same year, the Balfour Declaration expressed support for a Jewish homeland. Jews began returning in small numbers, purchasing land, establishing settlements, building what didn't exist. After World War II, with 6 million Jews dead in the Holocaust, the international community faced a decision. The survivors had nowhere to go. No country wanted them. Europe was devastated. and a small piece of land in the Middle East, the ancient homeland, stood as the only option. On May 14, 1948, David Ben-Gurion stood in Tel Aviv and read a declaration, 37 words in Hebrew that changed the prophetic landscape. We hereby declare the establishment of a Jewish state in the land of Israel, to be known as the State of Israel. The nation that hadn't existed for 1900 years existed again, recognized by the international community, holding territory, speaking the ancient language, raising a flag over the land their ancestors had lost. Isaiah's prophecy suddenly looked different. Chapter 66, verse 8. Who has ever heard of such things? Can a country be born in a day, or a nation be brought forth in a moment? A nation born in a day. On paper, that's exactly what happened. Israel went from non-existence to statehood in a single declaration. The impossible became reality. But the prophecy wasn't complete yet, because Jerusalem, the city at the center of every end times prophecy, remained divided. The old city, the Temple Mount, the Western Wall, all of it stayed under Jordanian control. Israel existed, but it didn't control the city that mattered most. That changed 19 years later. June 1967, Egypt mobilized troops on Israel's southern border. Syria positioned forces in the north. Jordan held the east. Israel faced enemies on 3 sides. The international community expected a massacre. Arab leaders promised to drive Israel into the sea. The war lasted 6 days. In less than a week, Israel captured the Sinai Peninsula, the Golan Heights, the West Bank, and most significantly, the Old City of Jerusalem. On June 7th, Israeli paratroopers entered through the Lion's Gate. They fought through narrow streets, and at 11 a.m., they reached the Western Wall. Soldiers who had never seen the wall wept. The shofar sounded. Prayers rang out in Hebrew for the first time in 2,000 years. The radio announcement carried across the nation, "The Temple Mount is in our hands." Jerusalem had returned. Not through negotiation, not through diplomacy, through conflict that lasted less than a week. And suddenly, every prophecy that required Jewish control of Jerusalem became possible again. Jesus had spoken about this moment. Luke chapter 21, verse 24. Jerusalem will be trampled on by the Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles are fulfilled. For 19 centuries, Jerusalem was trampled by Gentiles: Babylon, Persia, Greece, Rome, Byzantines, Muslims, Crusaders, Ottomans, British, Jordanians. Foreign power after foreign power controlled the city, until 1967. That year, the times of the Gentiles reached a turning point. Jewish control returned, and with it, the prophetic clock that had been paused in 70 AD started ticking again. Not immediately, not with obvious signs, but the conditions necessary for the final sequence were now in place. The nation existed, the city was under Jewish authority, the stage was set. Everything that follows, everything we see happening today, traces back to those 2 moments, 1948 and 1967, the return of the nation and the return of the city. Without them, none of the current preparations would be possible. Without them, the temple couldn't be rebuilt. Without them, the priesthood couldn't be restored. Without them, the prophecies about Jerusalem being surrounded by nations wouldn't make sense. But with them, everything changes. Zechariah's vision of national mourning requires a nation. His vision of Jerusalem surrounded requires Jewish Jerusalem. Daniel's final week requires the temple system, and the temple system requires sovereignty over the location. Now Israel has that sovereignty, and they're using it to prepare for what the prophets described. The red heifers brought from Texas are in Israel because Israel controls the land. The vessels being created in Jerusalem workshops exist because craftsmen can work freely. The priests being trained can train because the nation supports it. The preparations that seemed impossible for 2,000 years are now happening openly. This is the prophetic reset, the moment when conditions that disappeared in 70 AD returned in the 20th century, when the pause that seemed permanent suddenly ended, when the timeline that appeared broken resumed. And it raises an urgent question. If the nation returned in 1948 and Jerusalem returned in 1967, and the preparations for the temple system are happening now, how close are we to the next major event? The event that starts the final countdown. The event Daniel described with mathematical precision. The event that begins the last 7 years.
That's what we need to examine next. Because Daniel didn't just say the end would come. He gave a timeline, a specific sequence of events measured in weeks and years. A prophecy so precise that it's been called the backbone of biblical prophecy. And once you understand Daniel's 70 weeks, you'll understand why everything happening in Jerusalem right now matters more than any headline suggests. Behind a modest door in Jerusalem's old city, something remarkable is taking shape. Most tourists walk past without noticing. The sign is small, the entrance unremarkable. But inside, craftsmen are rebuilding what hasn't existed for 2,000 years. This is the Temple Institute, and their work isn't theoretical. Every vessel described in the Torah has been recreated, not as replicas for display, as functional instruments ready for use. The attention to detail is extraordinary because the Bible left no room for interpretation. Every measurement specified, every material named, every design element commanded. The menorah stands 7 feet tall, pure gold, 75 pounds, 7 branches, exactly as Exodus describes. Not a decorative piece, the actual lampstand required for temple service. It took years to create. Craftsmen studied ancient texts, consulted rabbis, verified every detail. The result is breathtaking, and it's ready. The table of showbread sits nearby, wood overlaid with gold, specific dimensions, built to hold the 12 loaves that represented the 12 tribes. This wasn't symbolic bread. This was actual bread, baked according to ancient formula, placed in the temple every Sabbath, eaten by the priests. The table exists now. The only thing missing is the temple to put it in. The altar of incense, reconstructed, acacia wood covered in gold, designed to burn the specific incense mixture commanded in Scripture. That incense has been prepared too, the exact spices, the exact proportions, sealed and waiting. Musical instruments fill another section, harps and lyres built according to ancient specifications, silver trumpets hammered into the precise shape priests used to announce festivals and new moons. These aren't museum pieces, they've been tested. Musicians trained in ancient temple music have played them. The sound matches descriptions from historical sources. Then there are the priestly garments. This is where the detail becomes almost overwhelming. The high priest's breastplate, 12 stones representing the 12 tribes, each stone specific: sardius, topaz, emerald, turquoise, sapphire, diamond, jacinth, agate, amethyst, beryl, onyx, jasper, each one cut and set in gold. The ephod, woven from gold thread, blue, purple, and scarlet yarn, and fine linen. Not modern equivalents, the actual dyes and materials specified. The blue came from a specific snail found in the Mediterranean. For centuries, no one knew which snail. Then marine biologists identified it. The dye can be produced again,
and it has been. The turban, the sash, the tunic, every piece of the high priest's attire has been created according to the exact biblical requirements. A man could put these garments on today and stand ready to serve. The regular priest's garments exist too: linen tunics, sashes, caps, all prepared according to Leviticus specifications, multiple sets because multiple priests would serve in shifts. But garments are only part of the preparation. The men who will wear them are being identified and trained. For 2,000 years, Jewish families maintained oral traditions about their lineage. Certain names indicated priestly descent: Cohen, Katz, variations of Aaron's line passed down generation after generation. But oral tradition alone wasn't enough, not for something this significant. So geneticists got involved. In the 1990s, researchers discovered something remarkable: a specific genetic marker appearing at high frequency among men with the surname Cohen, the Cohen modal haplotype, a Y chromosome signature passed from father to son, and it appeared across Jewish communities worldwide: Ashkenazi Jews in Europe, Sephardic Jews from Spain and North Africa, Mizrahi Jews from the Middle East, all carrying the same genetic marker. The odds of this happening by chance are astronomical. The only explanation is a common ancestor, a man who lived roughly 3,000 years ago, whose genetic signature survived intact through millennia of dispersion. Aaron, the first high priest, brother of Moses, the man God chose to establish the priestly line.